Hey, everybody, welcome to Pursuit of Infinity. I'm your host, Josh, and today we have a very special series. We're kicking off our Blue Morpho Academy series. You may or may not have heard on some of our previous episodes, some of my conversations with my brother, that I've been attending this Blue Morpho Academy. And the program is to become a psychedelic sitter and coach. So, what I decided to do was to go into our Telegram group here and just throw out invites to anybody who wanted to come on the show, just to talk about their story, to talk about whatever, to discuss our progress and all of that throughout the course. And as it's coming to a close here, we have a few weeks left in the course. We're starting up the recordings now, hopefully to release them soon. And we're kicking it off today with Tommy Linville. Tommy, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh man, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here. I like being the first one too, breaking the ice. We'll start strong.
Oh, yeah, we're going to start strong, man, because you have quite the story. So
Oh
let's just
yeah.
get right into it, dude. Let's start from the very beginning.
Yeah, man. So, like I was explaining to you a little bit earlier, though, background's very diverse, man. I grew up with separated parents, divorced, and I was growing up between nice settings like this for my vacations while being in pretty rural, poor conditions for all my school years down in North Carolina. So, like trailer parks and mansions. Like, if I had a bio or a biography, it would probably just be that would be the title. Title trailer parks and mansions. And I grew up with like going to a Christian private school that was really small, but also super advanced as far as education went. We were learning like algebra in third grade. And so I was also the kid to get picked on because I was poor. So I kind of weaponized my education as like my strength. It was a very fascinating thing. And father was kind of a difficult guy. He was a heavy drinker. My mom, she's had a strong heart. So she had to separate to kind of develop her situation to make sure to set her kids up for success. But yeah, man, like I was explaining to you about, my dad was a lightning rod for just accidents. My earliest memory was about visiting him, or one of my earliest memories was visiting him in the hospital when he rolled his 1992 Camaro RS T-top an estimated 9 times, ripped up a bunch of his skin. It was Easter. It was wild. And then there was this progression of these events. And we wound up getting in an accident rear-ended by a drunk semi-truck driver. He wasn't smart enough to settle the right way. We could have been set for life. So cool. I mean, it's like God's just like throwing you bones. It's like, there you go. You can get out of all this stuff. And he's like, nah, that ain't good. And when I was in about fifth or sixth grade, he got in this very intense car accident where I had to use the jaws of life to get him out. And this is on the Carolina coast bordering Virginia. And so they took him to Elizabeth City, and he had broken all of his ribs, punctured his lungs, face is destroyed, both of his arms are broken, like everything was just dismantled. Like he might as well have got ran over by a steamroller type shit. And he flatlined for 4 minutes. And the doctors didn't want to bring him back, but my stepmother was like, no, you got to. So when he came back, his first memories or his consciousness was him being a pirate, which was really wild. And then out of this coma, he had a brand new accent, and it's Shakespearean age colonial period dialect called high tide. And there are still communities in the Carolina coast that maintain that accent, which is really wild. So he had that with him till the day that he died. But the point of me bringing up these things is to establish some other good context to like some other good stories. So like I was saying, I'm growing up between these two different environments. It's very tough. It was weird being this really unique kid, in this type of specific setting. But it provided me with a very beautiful, unique perspective and appreciation for life. No doubt those times were definitely tough. And my father and I, we got in some pretty fucking physical fights, and that's eventually why I had to leave. And there was lying and stuff going on, but I'm at peace with him. I've forgiven him. I took care of him throughout his death too, and that's a whole other wild story too, man. But yeah, he was a lightning rod. So my introduction to psychedelics, though, is pretty crazy. So I was living in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and I didn't have a lot of freedoms when I was there. I was living in the middle of nowhere where I was treated in not the best way when it comes from a perspective of parenting, where it was like extremely strict control. But then when things weren't going perfect, they're like, why didn't you do this with all this like supposed responsibilities that you were given? It was just double-edged sword type shit nonstop. So I wound up taking driver's ed with one of my best friends. In fact, we are still best friends to this day. And his name's Derek. Derek's the man. I love him forever. So he'd already taken mushrooms before, and we shared a bunch of classes. And so we're at driver's ed, and it was a night course. And so I was allowed to stay the night at his house. And this is like fall. In North Carolina my sophomore year. So we're in our last class, and I'm pretty excited. We bought a half ounce, so 14 grams of mushrooms. We're going to split that from our first trip. So we're in this class, and there's like this poster on the wall about like anti-drug driving, and it's like all like trippy looking. And he's like, "That's basically kind of what it's going to be like." I'm like, "Tight." So we wake up the next day, and we were carrying this half ounce with us, and we just go walk to a gas station, and we just buy some candy, and we just chomp the whole bag right there in the gas station curb. Now, Wake Forest at the time, very small. I'm saying the population for the proper area might have been like 11,000 people, and it's the location is where the theologian college originated at, and then like Wake Forest University moved over to Winston Salem. So that was also where our high school was. So it's old, beautiful brick buildings, giant magnolia trees in a very quaint small town. Now, the cool thing about small towns are, wouldn't you know it, all the cops are the worst. So we eat all these mushrooms, and they kick in pretty swiftly. And we're hanging out like on the university campus. And, it's like we have this giant magnolia tree that's like legit just kind of like laughing and being beautiful. We're checking out cars, and cars are at this intersection just like stretching out in the longest like shapes. We're gut busting, laughing hysterically, feeling so good and connected. So we have this other friend. He picks us up. He's sober, well, ish. He's not tripping. And so there's a dude from California, and we're just driving around. And so we go out to the smoke spot we have out in the woods. And my buddy Derek, he's not smoking at the time because he's worried about getting a drug test from his parents, which is hilarious because it's all hypocritical shit. Meanwhile, his parents are smoking and doing all this other stuff too. So I'm out there, and kids are we're so smart sometimes, right? So this guy with us has got like a 2 foot bong with him. We're ripping this thing out in the woods. And so, like I was explaining, I had this difficult relationship with my father because I was at this period of like becoming very aware of what's going on and seeing through bullshit. And wouldn't we know it also, that's like when you introduce to psychedelics, it clears out all that field immediately, and you see things truly as they are. So there I am having like beautiful epiphanies out in the woods about who we are as people, civilization, and like really having this tremendous understanding of like, yeah, I mean, just like how things are and how much man-made bullshit exists and what needs to be dropped. And so wouldn't you know it, I'm starting to peak, so you get hit by these waves. So I'm out in the woods, dead leaves everywhere, and like the fallen leaves, they all suddenly they come together like point to point, and it looks like 2D stage props. And then the trees are flat, and I have to call my dad and explain some things. I don't even remember what the conversation was, but somehow I diffused and things are cool. And I'm like, okay, way to go, awesome. So I tell my buds, I'm like, "Can we get out of here?" I'm like, I think I'll have a bad time if we keep meditating on these things. So we're leaving, and man, it's just like I'm seeing like kind of like Windows 95 graphics for a video game type vision. It's just not even like it's tight, but like it's kind of like, well, this is a little bit weird. And these trees are spiraling down at me, and that's all I can kind of comprehend. And so the guy that we're with, what a genius! He decides to park behind like a CVS, and why would you park there, right? And I'm just in my own mind. And so get this, also at the time, like I've got very long hair. I got a camo jacket on. I'm wearing like a tie-dye like Doors t-shirt. I got aviators on, ripped up jeans, and a bandana, very similar. Looking like, a non-protester, like fuck Nixon type vibes. And so we're sitting behind this CVS, and it's got like cinder block just walling, and the walls are just sliding down, and every little crack is changing rapid neon rainbow colors. There's a metal box to the side that's covered in rust, and it's just like bleeding all over the place, this ooze pouring. And then suddenly a cop shows up, of course. What are y'all doing over here? We got a report for some suspicious activities. You mind if I search the car? And then the driver, Mike, he's like, "Yeah." And we're like, "Dude, why the fuck would you say that?" And then he's like, "Officer, do I have the right to deny that?" Of course, the cop ignores him. What does he do? He calls another unit. So we're sitting in the car, and we're like, "All right, Mike, you're probably going to need to hide this weed somewhere deep on your body, if you know what I'm saying." And like, we got this. You're going to get a paraphernalia charge anyways, dude. Just eat that. That's better. He's like, "No, I'm just going to hide the weed under the seat." We're like, "Oh my God, dude. Like, we're younger than you, and we're telling you all this like the shit you should know not to do. So the cop asked me to get out of the car. He just like slaps my pockets on me. He's like, "What is that? Keys and change?" I'm like, "Yeah." Doesn't even look at my pockets. And he's like, "All right, go stand over there." So I'm standing off to the side, kind of leaning on the hood of this police car. I'm like, "Oh, Tommy, we're so fucked right now." I'm like, "But you know what? Freaking out's not going to do any good." I'm like, "What's going to happen, bud? You're going to go hang out at the police department. Your parents are going to be so pissed. You'll be grounded for so long. But freaking out isn't going to do any fucking good." So I'm watching all this stuff unfold. And then so the cops find something in the front seat. What they first find though is some salvia. Back then, salvia was like you could buy it at a gas station. Like, what's this? He's like, "Oh, it's salvia, man. We'll make sure to keep it in the labeled packaging next time." We're like, "Okay." And I'm tripping very hard watching this shit unfold. And then suddenly, the cops find the weed. Now, at this time, I was a part of like a skateboarder clique. And this was a very interesting vibe. It also described there's true racial tensions that were going on in my environment, especially at the high school. So the skater group was like right in between what was going on. We had just basically carte blanche to move, flow, and skater kids always have the coolest stuff going on. We had a very big network, and it was a crazy time also because it's actually built on the news. There was kids that were disappearing, and everybody still had flip phones, but social media really hadn't been developed quite just yet. Like Facebook at this time was like only for college folks. Anyways, what happened was kids got busted, set up cameras in their house, and they started running this big sting operation, and kids were just disappearing all over the place. And when you know it, all of like Wake County got very dry because we had an elaborate system between like us and the college kids and us supplying for like parents, the whole community. It was crazy. And I'm referring to like marijuana. So, anyways, the cop finds this herb. And like I was saying, what our connections were, we like know it's really great. In fact, it's not even like 100% cured. It's still super fresh. So the cop pulls it out and he's like, "Huh, looks like it's kind of covered in some mold." We're like, "Oh no, this guy's a genius. He's an ex-narcotic unit. Wow." He's like, "Yeah, this honestly doesn't have enough stem structure on it. Typically, like some of the more higher quality things are going to be having a little bit more seeds too." And we're like, "Oh my God, no way." And he's like, "We talked to one of your mothers. So we're just going to have you guys destroy this. And yeah, you guys just go directly home." And we're like, "What do you mean destroy this?" And he's like, "We'll just have you stomp it out on the ground." And we're like, "Oh my God, they found weed and then they stopped searching the car." Usually when you find a little something, you're like, "Oh, we're gonna rip everything up," right? And we're like, "Oh my God, this is the wildest shit ever." So we're sitting there tripping hard, like using our feet, just like kind of stomping on the ground, looking at each other like is this really going on right now? So we get done and we're getting ready to walk away, and they're like, "Now, if we catch you trying to scrape it up, we're gonna find some problems." And we're like, "Okay, pal." And then we just left. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. With I was explaining the context of like the targeted stuff against the kids in our high school, like all of that building up. And it just blew my mind. And like at that moment, I was like, "Dude, Tommy, like you are legit. You're good to go to handle all of like the stresses associated and accompanied with the psychedelic realm, like beyond like the what you're doing internally, right?" So I'm sitting here being confronted with like thinking about like parent shit, the cops, all the implications that are going to go on there. I'm just like basically just sitting there stoic, like, "Yeah, here we go." So that was how I lost my virginity to psychedelics. And boy, man, I kept running with it from then on too. I've had a blast, and it's been a very beautiful relationship. And and I love where I'm going at with it. Now it's with much more targeted precision. And through these things, I've developed a lot of tremendous beliefs about my connection to universe and God, and I don't believe in God being like the rigid thing that we find in religious texts. I think God's even beyond what we understand in our group is so complex we'll never fully get to comprehend it, right? But we know that it is creation, it is an us and everything. And I find the more you work with it and communicate with it, the more it communicates back. It's a beautiful thing. And I've used psychedelics from that point on, to enhance and enrich my life big time, but also to treat other forms of my depression, and like really cure it and knock it out of the park. Even when I've had like very specific problems, I would go and ingest, quite a bit of like very powerful LSD. And I would just sit alone in my house and be like, "All right, what's the worst thing that could happen?" I don't encourage that for the average person, but I'm like, I'm going to calculate every worst thing that can happen and then come up with a solution to those problems and get rid of those out of my life. And it's worked like a charm for me, like truly. And when we think about the term medicine, right? So, medicine in the dictionary is something loosely along the lines to treat disease and prevent disease, right? But so, what is disease? Disease is like a disruption of your functionality with certain symptoms as being a human. Like, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but if we shift what we apply the word disease to, and we're talking about disrupting your function, what if your dysfunction that is going on is the inability of you to have a good time, to engage in fun or something like that, right? So I believe, yes, the ceremonial space, amazing. But I also believe that we can move ceremony around and we can topically treat things when adequately dosed with the right guide around you. And when we start applying the scope of disease, like let's think about another disruption of our function. What's disrupting us sometimes is hunger and thirst. And so if you're sick, why wouldn't you choose the best medicine? So therefore, it's like the best contents to consume. And that type of shift in my perspective drastically increased over the summer with doing some private ceremonies with Maestro Christian, and that just every ceremony I do between Hamilton and Christian, it keeps expanding so much more awareness in the most beautiful way, and it's like the most tremendous snowball effect. And I'm I'm so passionately invested into this that I know forever this is a part of my life. And I love that we are connected, you and I, with our community and with what I consider the best resources available to guide us and hone and sharpen our skills. I mean, I've personally experienced what I'd consider maximum healing through them. I went through this period, as I referenced, of my father died under the craziest circumstances. I was also an evacuee from Hurricane Ida. While being an evacuee, I was hired as a beverage director for a company. So I'm remotely developing a high volume, like multi-million dollar bar in the French Quarter. Now, at the same time, my wife is like secretly cheating on me. And I've been together with her for like 8 years. And I'm like, oh, like I don't see through this shit. And I had all these things that were very close to me as a part of my identity and my purpose for doing things. And I lost them all basically at the same time. And I found myself very much so, I'm fucking over this shit, like living, I mean. And I had this beautiful relationship with my mother, and she hadn't heard from me for a while. And this was the summer of last year. And so I don't even want to pick up the phone. And we're so transparent. I've gotten like coke from her sister down in Peru. I'm like railing it in front of her. She's seen me do ketamine. We talk about everything. We don't hide anything. It's great. Of course, we get in fights sometimes. We're family, but not having any of those barriers, it just relieves so much more. And I like to always live my life as like the example, of that, like you can do these things and still be a great person and not be like, detrimental to society. I'm not hurting myself or anybody else. I'm doing things responsibly. The exception to the rule, perhaps. So she's calling me, and all I say is like, hello. And she's like, oh my God, what's going on with you? And she's got insane intuition. She Several years ago, she called me from the Caribbean, and I'm getting ready to go to work. She goes, hey, I think my sister's dead. Can you go check on her? Guess what? I rolled to her house, the sister's house. Sure shit, she's dead. Um, and through those types of things, this is how she decided to find Hamilton, because she wanted to make sense of her spirituality and the strong intuition. She's always been the matriarch of her family. She's the only person I know that has a similar childhood to me, but it's like tenfold as far as intensities go. So yeah, when she heard about what was going on in my life, she's like, "Well, if you quit your job because everything was so terrible, and you're done with your dad, and shit's terrible with your marriage, she's like, just come home right now. Bring your dog." They go home, and she's like, "You know what we have to do?" I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "I know what she's gonna say." She's like, "We have to do ayahuasca." I was like, "Cool." I'm like, you know what? If I'm really thinking about this, like, or thinking about ending everything, you still try something else. You know what I mean? Like, and your mom's gonna pay for the trip. Fuck yeah. So what else was really wild was the next day, one of my best friends ever, he hits me up. He's going through a rough patch. This is a different guy from the original story, or the one about the cops. And he's like, "Hey man, do you feel like going down to Peru and trying ayahuasca?" He's like, "I'm going through some shit." I'm like, "That's so weird because we just booked the trip already." And the way that things unfolded was that my mother couldn't go, so we just had my buddy Harvey take her spot. We gifted it to him, and I arranged a really beautiful trip. Now, a couple months before I went down, I had a very, very fascinating dream. And so my dream state has been since I was approximately 6 or 7 years old, like lucid and clear. I remember like this nightmare I had where it's like Harry Connick Jr. is trying to kill me while I'm cutting my grass in my front yard. The movie, like Copycat, I guess I saw it. My parents let me watch anything of when I was a child. Like, hey, yeah, just sit here. It's only going to scar you, maybe, or make you tougher. So I'm sitting here cutting the grass at my trailer park. You do do. Dad's gonna be mad if I don't cut the grass. Oh look, Harry Connick Jr. is coming at me with a fucking knife to fucking kill me. And I was just like, no, like no, like I got so much shit going on. Not today. Blew him off, and then I had very many really really beautiful, insane dreams since then. Like it truly is an architect designing things. I mean, like I met my wife in a dream before I ever met her before, and she told me what we have is sacred. This is not some fantasy fucking thing. And I've met other people. I met Christian, Maestro Christian in my dreams before we ever connected in person. And so, you get the idea about these things now a little bit. So, a couple months before I went to the Blue Morpho retreat, I dreamt that I was already there at the lodge, hanging out by the river on one of their little picnic tables. And I'm hanging out with this woman. She passes me a little cup, drink it, and she's just like talking to me about the experiences, what we're gonna do. And the drink tasted just like mezcal. And so I'm like, huh? I'm like, is this the ayahuasca? I'm like, it's kind of crazy. It tastes so much like mezcal. She's like, no, 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 no. She's like, this is something to prepare you for Aya. And so I'm chatting with her, and then I see in the night sky just like digital ancient script, like kind of like red alarm clock font, but just some language I can't discern. It was very weird. And then so later in the dream, I ingest ayahuasca, and I'm at the Blue Morpho Lodge, and I'm like, get out of town. I'm like, that's what this is. I'm like, this is great. And so I got to carry that with me when I went down there. And so like my very first night, I was like, Tommy, dude, you've already done this. You're good to go. And so I slammed it down. And man, like my first 4 nights there, or the first 4 ceremonies I did, all I had was like yawns as far as my purging was go. I only puked one time, and that was actually back in my room with my buddy Harvey, who came with me. And I had some like medicated cream that I got there from a pharmacy. He's like, "Oh, is this your cream?" I'm like, "Yeah, dog." Putting on my face. And then approximately 10, 15 minutes later, I guess, it's running through my system. And it was just like involuntary, like I'm going to hurl. And sure as shit, it came out. That was like the medicine being like, dumbass. Like, I told you not to take anything. But dude, and so with all that terrible depression I was telling you about, within the very first night, all that was gone. In fact, we went through this list of intentions, right? Or build your intentions. So my intentions were for understanding my connection to culture and civilization, my lineage. I want to understand things about my path. I want to understand things about my emotional state that was going on and things about my relationship. So fortunately, while I was being cheated on, I was being gaslit the whole time about my suspicions.
Of
That's really
course.
fun, right? Of course, right? But like, it's like, dude, look at me. I'm laughing today about this shit. Life's hilarious. It made me stronger, and I learned about taking ownership of these things, and other realms about allowing things into my life that influenced me. That was me, really. But so how it started was, I slammed Aya, and first off, I mean, have you ingested ayahuasca, right?
I haven't actually.
Oh wow! So, but you're very aware of the flavor being intense, right?
For sure,
So,
yes.
so my background is heavily so in craft cocktails. That's what I was doing since like 2016, and I started very high volume, Washington D.C., doing everything from scratch, running like a prep program every single time I've been in forms of bartending world, whether it's been a director, bartender, whatever. I've you know very heavily flavor profiles, and my creative side of me really focuses on the cocktail craft of creation. So I drink this, and I was just like, I can make this taste good in a cocktail, guaranteed. I'm like, all this needs like it needs a little bit of pineapple in here, some good powerful rum, a little bit of lime, some orgeat, some almond syrup. I'm like, we'll be good to go. My first thoughts, and I sit down, and within about like 15 minutes, your body really start to radiate different temperatures. You're feeling like vibrations, like your body's like recalibrating to receive everything. And so then I'm like kind of in this realm. That's usually what I first kind of encounter is like this like plant world of spirits that are like very vegetative and a little bit flowy. And they're like, "What's up, man? What do you want to do? What's your speed? Nice to meet you." And it's kind of mischievous a little bit. I'm like, "All right, we're gonna vibe. I get this." And then there's like these other spirits that kind of like doing some like doctor work on me, like kind of probing a little bit. They're like, "Okay, cool. We see what's going on with you. We're gonna get you through this. We're gonna get you through this, dog." And then I see Mama Aya briefly. I'm like, "Oh wow, there she is, beautiful." And so your brain is you're hyper lucid in your thought. In fact, I think your brain's, it's working faster than ever. And so the next thing I know is like I have this spectator view and I'm looking down a thriving Incan civilization. And I'm like, wow, fascinating. The next thing I know, I'm like seeing like stuff in like Central America, perhaps Aztec Mayan stuff. I'm just like, the fuck am I seeing this for? I was like, dude, you asked about your connection to civilization. And then I start seeing these things going on, like living, thriving cultures, like in North America too. I'm like, this is great. This is amazing. And I'm deeply passionate about history, and so this continues on to a progression of shamanic ceremonies throughout time and throughout all the Americas, and then it ended in Siberia. And afterwards, I'm sitting in a rocking chair, by the way. So at Blue Morpho, there's like mostly mats on the ground, and then there's like this giant circular lodge, and there's like bathrooms on the outside, showers if you need, and there's kind of like a front stage where Hamilton and other people will sit at. And my mom's like, "You're gonna love the rocking chair better." I'm like, "My mom knows me. I'm definitely gonna sit in the rocking chair." I'm glad I did. So I'm sitting in this rocking chair, and then like, and my eyes close in the dark, and then I see like this very tremendous, massive spirit of like a shaman. Like I'm saying, he's like stories tall. And he's like outlined kind of like how you would like a constellation, like, blue, light blue. And he's got like a bull horn. And the dude's muscular as shit. And the vibe was very much so to me was like, welcome to the fucking show. And so I'm sitting there just like grinning so hard. I'm like, man, I would be happy if I was in this state of altered consciousness for eternity. I was very comfortable in this. And then the next thing I got to see was like Anubis 3/4 turn to me. And he's like so far deep in outer space, like the deepest I could fathom. And he's outlined in like neon rapid changing colors. He's got a halo. And I'm just like, I knew all this shit was real in my heart. And I was provided like concrete evidence about just other extra things. And then I got to learn about my emotions. And this was really fascinating to me. So I was always being like told I have all these anger problems, but I was justifiably angry with a lot of things that were going on in my life. I had my career job. To be real, they screwed me pretty hard, but I still love them as like an entity, and I decided to separate myself because I wanted to preserve what friendship I have with them. And I had my wife with all that stuff going on, and my father just died under complicated circumstances. And then when you're being gaslit and put in this corner and being constantly told you're wrong, and mind you, also, my wife hadn't worked for 3 years. That's me working like 60, 70 hours a week, paying for everything. So yeah, I'm fucking pissed. But I want to understand more about my anger. So what was revealed to me, it was a disruption of my confidence that was leading to anger. And so to break that down a little bit more clearly, it's like, so think about this. Let's say that you and I we're walking down a sidewalk together. Easy enough task. But let's say the edge of the sidewalk is suddenly just a cliff that drops for like 10 miles, right? Let's say it's like that on both sides of the sidewalk. Suddenly we're like kind of quivering a little bit, like, ooh, this is tough. But why? We're just as capable of walking on that sidewalk. It was just because there's like this fear that's disrupting our confidence. And what I started to realize was that like I was scared of losing my trophy wife. You know what I mean? Like I was scared of being wrong about stuff. I was scared about making the wrong decision. And so I dropped all that shit, man. And then what I started to understand about my relationship was that I was shown that my wife and I, we were like an interwoven kind of double helix growing tree bearing fruit and a beautiful sunset. And it was told to me that we've always been together, like past life shit, and we'll always be together. And so what I realized is like, it's okay for me to let go and that we're just done in this time. And that was my first day, dude. And then I was like, wow, I think I just fixed everything in my life in day one. And I still got 3 more nights. And I remember just overhearing the next day at breakfast, somebody's like, "Fuck me. I can't believe we got 3 more days." In my mind, I'm like, "We only got 3 more days?" But yeah, man, it's fascinating, and through all this stuff, though, you know, I have so much gratitude and infinite love for Hamilton and all the family at Blue Morpho too, because like Hamilton is the truth and the guide, right? But he also has like the people that live and stay with him, they're also an infinite wealth of knowledge. And what I find so great about the Blue Morpho community when you're there in person is that you're working together, learning with like also like the new team of people that show up. Plus, you have the other people there that are just hanging out with you nonstop. And so it's just like this continuous like volley of like great conversation, encouraging of people, sharing your understanding and your wisdom. Because also when you teach, you learn so much more too. It just goes back and forth. And when we're all working together, paddling in the same direction on that canoe, that's a super fun ride, you know? And then you're just experiencing the best healing you could ever get in your entire life, man.
Amazing,
Plus, just
amazing.
yeah, plus just the coolest shit ever. Seriously, like I guess one of my philosophies and viewpoints is like we're doing serious work, right? But there's no reason serious work can't be seriously fun. And for me, I'm always like, let's turn on that fun, turn off that fear, enjoy this ride. You know, I mean, even in real life, I can't help but laugh at like really absurd, like crazy things. I'm like, of course that happened. I like have a mental note to God. I'm like, fuck yeah, God. I'm like, exactly. Thanks, universe. Cool.
I gotta ask, how similar was your first ayahuasca experience to the ayahuasca experience that you had in your dream?
Oh wow. So in the dream, it was me open-eyed walking around, and actually what was really crazy was I encountered, my ex-girlfriend from, like, high school and college. It was wild, and it wasn't, like, anything weird. I was just like, her and her family helped cultivate and turn me into one of the best versions of myself in development. So they're always dear in my heart. Actually, I saw her recently, I think September, you know, which is cool. We're good friends. It's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. So I ran into her while I was, you know, experiencing the ayahuasca in the dream. But honestly, the experience was very much so like eyes open, smoking DMT outside. That was for me what it was like, the types of textures, even the body sensations. And in my dreams, like I absolutely taste, I smell, I hear, like, I get full sensories. I've, like, critiqued a cocktail bar one time in my dreams. I was, like, drinking a Negroni. I'm like, "Oh my god, this is way too much sweet vermouth. Put it back." So, like, I'm pretty much there, man, and the dream state during my dieta while I was here was absolutely profound too, every single day. Even last night, the part of the dieta, you know, is I guess you want me to do a little rundown since maybe some of us aren't familiar a little bit, or would
Yeah.
you? Sure. So a part of our shamanic practices, you know, to build this community with the plants and their spirits is we go kind of through a purification process. So physically, you know, we're doing a detox. And what we're doing is we're allowing to get rid of anything that's going to be in between us and these plants, right? And so for me, I kind of perceive this union as like, let's say me and you are at a party, right? It's going to be harder for us to connect on this level. So let's, in my opinion, I want to have like limited amount of plants in me during that time so we can have this clear, direct line of really getting to know each other, right? So basically, what you're going to do is you're going to only eat a very limited amount of food. Every day for how long you decide to do your dieta. Traditionally, I think it's usually going to be around 9 days, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. And so you'll make a tea out of whatever plants. And there's sacred plants that we do this with. And there, I believe there's like 7 of them done in Peru, but you can do it with any plant. Everything has spirit to it. I chose to use one sacred teacher plant, Mapacho, which is a variety and species of tobacco down in Peru, which I brought back with me from my last trip. And then I harvested a bit of this oak tree that's hundreds of years old that I meditate with frequently in New Orleans, which is really fascinating. So over this 9 day stretch, it's you're abstaining from sex, masturbation, no salt, no sugar, no drinking, no drugs. And I chose to take a pretty extreme route, 3 day water fast. Then I have 6 days of only having breakfast and lunch, which was just hard or soft boiled eggs, you know, no spices, anything with rice. And then the lunch was chicken thighs and rice. And so the first 2 days, great. Day three, you're kind of like, man, this water fast, I don't know. Like, I really don't know. And so what's going on is you're aligning your subconscious with your conscious, and that really comes to play in your dream state. And so the spirits inside of you of the plants that you're going through with this, they're working with you. You're finding out your strengths, you're finding out your weaknesses, and we're working on them. And then this is how we kind of figure out a little bit what intentions we're going to ask these spirits to help us navigate with in our lives, you know. But you're essentially confronted with subtle and profound challenges along the way. I mean, it can be physical manifestations in your life, things that could trigger you, but the dream state for me was like the top notch thing that was going down. So I remember that like I actually got to confront and interact with my ex. I mean, we're still technically married, we're going through divorce, but what was wild was I didn't realize it was gonna be our 5-year anniversary while I was here. I also didn't realize that when I wrapped up my 9-day dieta on the 10th day, we were doing ceremonies virtually with Hamilton. I'm like, wow, stars really lining up. But what really tripped me out though was it was like the energies and the spirits of the plants allowed me a platform in my dream state to just say the last things I need to say. And now I felt like the best ever regarding peace about everything. There was like things I didn't realize that were still left, like just like hiding out in corners of like my psyche. And I got to dig those out. But like, man, fun challenge was though, my second day, I found myself in my dream state in the most elaborate wild strip club I've ever seen in my life, and it was ran by a cartel. And I'm just like, oh boy, and this is me like getting my consciousness being like, all right, this is And I was like, all right, we got to get out of here, bud, because you want to preserve yourself because it's about purity the whole way through. But I just remember exiting and I was just like, man, whenever this dieta is done, I might be back here. And then I got out of there. But yeah, so I wrapped that up and things are beautiful and I'm very passionate about where life's going, you know, and like I was explaining all those difficult things I went through, right? So I survived those, right? And I triumphed over them. And after I came back from that first ayahuasca retreat, this is when the concrete evidence came out regarding my wife. And without all the tools and wisdoms, I wouldn't have been able to handle it with so much maturity. In fact, I was in this home when I found out about everything. And I've been a heavy drinker since I was like early teens. Now, my relationship with alcohol was never dependent based. I just really love enhancing life, so to speak. And I mean, I used to drink enough to probably kill a couple people if they would try to keep up with me, like real talk was in my body. But when I stopped drinking, I never felt like I'm a piece of shit if I don't have alcohol in my system type thing, you know? But so when I found out, I drank with my brother just as like a sense of like bonding. And then after that, I chose not to drink for a month and a half. I was like, I'm going to confront these issues with grace. And then I chose to go back home and our home we shared. And I'm like, we're going to sit right here. We're going to do the work and we're going to get through this. And, I've been a very intense partier for my whole life, man. And so it's really cool to see my progress. I'm really proud of myself since June 22nd. I basically have cut out everything out of my life that like was routine and I've dropped perhaps maybe like 45 pounds, man. Feeling good, feeling happy. And Hamilton talks about this notion of it's not saying no, it's saying yes. And so it's like me saying yes to it's me saying hell yes, actually, to everything that's amazing in life. And what this practice does has been yielding for me the most amazing results. And the other thing I wanted to include was that, like, so all those crazy things that were happening, I was like, why the fuck is this happening? And then suddenly I realized this was life clearing out all the bullshit that was standing in between me and what I'm about to receive. And since then, man, like I got immediately when I switched that perspective, I got invited to go to Patagonia for a work trip to go hiking deep in nature on a 12,000-year-old trail for work. Who the hell gets invited to do that for work? And now I'm getting ready to run and operate a company I've always looked up to. It just suddenly presented itself. I was feeling hurt and lost about certain areas I thought my career was going towards that I was getting shut out of for no reason, apparently. And that was another thing, realizing that like this was life being like, no, 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 no. This right here is coming for you. And yeah, this guy announced for his company that he's going to retire. And if he doesn't find the right buyer, done forever. And I'm like, this is a 10-minute old post. I'm like, getting on my phone, like, hey, I'd be interested. Next thing I know, we're DMing. Next thing I know, we're on email. Next thing I know, I got an attorney. Next thing I know, I'm on Zoom. Next thing I know, he says, you're the guy I want to sell to. And so I've been wrapping that deal up here. And it's a company that makes tools for craft bartending, and it's deeply embedded in esotericism and imagery. And so, with me practicing all this shamanic stuff on the side, I'm thrilled about putting my very real positive intentions into these tools that bartenders are going to use. So it's like me putting light and positiveness into a field that's extremely dark with like a really good message. So whether they know it or not, when all the liquid's pouring through these tools, you're getting some of me there that's going to be a really positive vibe, you know? And I'm living in a cocktail capital of the world, and so, yeah, I'm just thrilled. It's like my past is coming together in a really cool way because I used to make jewelry back in the day. So I'm like, jewelry, this beverage scene, my life is clean of all of its bullshit. I'm the happiest I've ever been, man. It's wonderful. It's a blessing for real.
Yeah, man, these tools are amazing technologies for healing. And I mean, not just healing in the traditional sense that we define it as in like a, a first world country. I mean, this
Yeah.
is healing in every single type of way, physical, mental, psychological, all of it. It's amazing, man. And you bring up the ceremonies that we had. So, as part of the Blue Morpho Academy, Hamilton, our instructor, he hosted 2 I don't know if there's gonna be a third. I really hope there's gonna be a third,
I
but,
hope
uh,
so.
they were amazing. He hosted these ceremonies where the very first one, there were 2 so far. So the first one, he hosted the night of an ayahuasca ceremony. So we were virtually brought into a live ayahuasca ceremony, and I mean, you're hearing people vomit in the back, and his Icaros are just slapping, and I mean, it
And
was amazing.
yeah, and honestly, it was no well, the differences were not there in person, but you're getting the same healing through the technology. I mean, like, the one that we just did on Sunday, at the end of it, I had like a very tremendous, like deep guttural purge, and I'm like radiating all this heat. I'm like listening to it on my speaker, like in the bathroom, like, oh man, I can't wait for this to get out of me. Hell yeah.
So what did you consume for the first one and the second one? So for me,
Oh
I
boy.
took I took 2.5 grams of mushrooms for the first one, and then the second one I took just a tiny little bit of psilocybin, and I vaporized moon rocks,
Oh,
and
nice.
it was amazing, dude. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be as strong and as powerful
Yeah.
as it was, but it worked, man. It was great.
So, oh man, I got a funny one. You know, I've got a certain style to me. I'm a little bit wild. I like, yeah. I realized for a long time ago, like I wasn't competing with anybody with what I was doing except myself. I'm like, where we're going, Tommy? Where else can we push these things? You know? I mean, I had some fun role models growing up. Like my calling to psychedelics was very much so. My father introduced to me like the dark side of Oz when I was probably like 7 years old. He's like, we're gonna synchronize, Dark Side of the Moon, Wizard of Oz. I'm like, no wonder I'm me, dude. Like, although we had problems, he was very cool with music and culture and stuff like that. And he put me onto the Doors and Pink Floyd and all that stuff when I was like very young. So I was already like, I know I'm getting into psychedelics. I can't wait for it, right? So and then Jim Morrison he was a bit of a role model for me when I was young. So I'm like, let's see how far we can go. What is that pursuit of the unknown? You know, like I do want to know. I'm curious. I've always been searching, and like sometimes I tap into shit that's just like truly spiritual. Like before I got this honed in craft through Blue Morpho, like just wild. But so the first ceremony, man, I got like this jaguar skull with me, like a legit one that I got from Iquitos. And so, anyways, I had 3 grams of these mushrooms. They're Thrasher Melmax, which are like so. There's penis envies, and then what they noticed was there were certain strains or certain ones that would grow that were a little bit more potent. So those were Thrashers, and then they had the Melmax, and then somebody's like, "Well, we should just grow those together." And crossbreed. So my buddy, he was doing those, and so these are very potent, man. So I had those for the first one, and I'm just doing all this ketamine as well. And so I'm like using since we're like in a shared video, I'm like, yeah, Tommy, you're ridiculous. Why not? So I'm taking this jaguar skull bone and using that as basically my spoon to ingest this ketamine. So what I got to experience on that setting was wild, like very good. So this is when I would describe I truly felt maximum healing was during this virtual ceremony, which makes it that much more profound and, being able to demonstrate how we can connect in these real ways, without having to physically be there in person. So I'm laying on my couch and I feel myself like completely melt like in a liquid state with all dimensionality, with all the physical stuff that's around me. And I felt like I was on a stage, a shared stage with every bit of existence to watch me cleanse myself and then come back and materialize. It was the true state of oneness and God consciousness working around. It's beautiful, very, very beautiful, man. And like for me, I came back and I was like, I felt kind of wet on my body. Like, so with me and my experiences with like ketamine, is I've basically had it just as tremendous, if not sometimes more tremendous than what I've experienced with ayahuasca, and that's a bold statement to make, but I suppose it has a lot to do with the fact that, I've already had it in my system, and it works together. So with, Maestro Christian, we did 2 ceremonies together at my mother's house, and, he's just calling on basically all the medicines that have been living inside of our bodies, and, like, in real time, he's like, "MDMA on." And I'm like, "No way, I'm about to be rolling." He's like, "LSD vision on." I was like, "Yes." And he goes, "Ketamine vision on." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." And he's just pulling out and he's like, "Ayahuasca on," and boom. And so when I work through my personal ceremonies, I absolutely always talk to Mama Aya all the time. And so I think that has a very, very big significant, role into what I'm going through with my ketamine journeys. And so with those, I'm I don't like, I don't pussyfoot around that. I go far. And so, I mean, I'll literally ingest a gram at a time, and my goals are to see where I'm going, how far I can go. And so I found myself getting back into these same dimensions or realms and mapping them out. And I'm like encountering the same spirits, and it's really, really profound. And I've had one-on-ones with God. I've had my body like in Toy Story, remember when the aliens are in the claw thing? I did some cam, getting ready to do a ceremony, and I'm actually leaning over my coffee table and not exactly in a comfortable position, and I'm pulled out of my body. And I had some concerns going on about certain things like in my heart. Somebody I'm like, what's going on between me and another person type thing. And like just really thinking about it. And we have a really unique, beautiful relationship, but I'm respectful about everything, right? And anyway, so like God pulls me out of my body. I'm on like in the edge of the universe. It's just him and his infinite white light, and then me just staring off. And I'm just getting blasted by everything. I'm like, whoa, whoa. And the experience was like, know me, man. Know that everything's okay. You're fine. Like, ease your mind. Everything is chill. And then I come back into my state, and I'm still in the same position, looming over my coffee table. And ketamine's a dissociative, so it usually takes a period, maybe like 30 minutes, even sometimes an hour, for you to regain and like pull back all of your senses, your faculties. And I come back to this state immediately with the most hyper lucid mind, with my body feeling the strongest and the best it's ever been. And then, like, to me, it was just like a divine interaction out of nowhere. So I've got a really fun, beautiful relationship with ketamine, but I also know to pump the brakes sometimes. We all need rest on our bodies, right? But so for this recent ceremony, they were doing San Pedro down there, which I can't wait to try a Hamilton San Pedro ceremony. That's got to be magical. But so for here it was 7 in the morning for me. I just ended 9 days of a strict diet. And so I get up, and so the first thing I eat that was not my dieta regimen was it was 3.13 grams of these really potent mushrooms that I lemon teched. Oh boy, that was quite the morning. I would say, yeah, I am saying it was fantastic, but that's a hell of a way to start. I had a blast.
Yeah, man. Do you lemon tech often?
So honestly, I got into that doing ceremonies with Christian. I was like, why not? In the past, I would just chomp them, man. Never was a big deal to me. I never really got too worried about the flavor, and especially the older I've gotten, like I was explaining, like my background in the beverage world, it's like we're kind of masochists for really wild flavor profiles, because if you keep tasting the same types of basic things, it's like lose its like interesting factor. So we're like, oh, what's this obscure bitter amaro, or it's an Italian aperitif. So for me, I'm like, I've destroyed my palate, or at least I've calloused it, so to speak, in a way. So like flavors don't really bother me that much, like at all at this point. Like, ooh, that's an interesting note. Wow, put that one in the memory bank. But yeah, I find lemon tech's great though. I'll probably always do it. What I personally like to do though, instead of fresh citrus, I have like organic citric acid at home Just mix that with purified water, sprinkle that in there, crush it up, stir it, let it sit, slam it, good to go.
Perfect. Yeah, and for anybody who doesn't know what lemon teching is, you essentially inject or you pour over like grinded up fine mushrooms, citrus juice, lemon juice. What I usually try to do is like get fresh lemons, chop them in half, and like squeeze them in there, as opposed to like just grabbing some orange juice or some lemon juice.
Hmm.
And supposedly, it's supposed to pre-convert the psilocybin into psilocin, which is actually what's causing the hallucinations, quote unquote, and the psychedelic experience. So it's said to shorten the trip, but also shorten the onset, and in some circumstances, makes it more powerful. Um,
Yeah,
I have. I haven't really experienced it being more powerful, but I have experienced like the shortening of the come up, the shortening of the trip overall. But to me, I mean, it doesn't matter, man. If you ingest the psilocybin mushrooms, it's gonna be powerful
for
regardless.
sure. I mean, I remember though, like, are we about the same age? I'm 34.
I'm 34.
Oh, cool. We are exactly the same age. When's your
Right
birthday,
on.
actually?
July 21st.
Okay, cool, cool. Does that make you a Cancer?
Yeah,
Cool. I'm an Aquarian. Day after Valentine's Day, February 15th. Cool, man. That's
sweet,
awesome.
sweet.
Kindred spirits. I love that stuff. But I'm sure. Well, so for me, my early interactions with the psychedelic world too. I'm like, I grew up a skater, man. So it's like we were already crazy to begin with. What we're gonna push ourselves through, and oh man, I got a million stories, but let's keep it a little bit more honed in. I'm unscripted, but I don't know if you've ever been around those. Like when we were younger, people are like, oh yeah, let's slam like the orange juice, like you're mentioning while you're eating the mushrooms, because supposedly to enhance it and all that stuff. I remember just like we're even slamming orange soda, just like yeah, hell yeah, I think this will do something. I'm sure it barely did, other than it just tasted awesome. um, I do find though, there's like in my past, at least with ingestion, that there's a similar vibe to like if you were to make a mushroom tea as far as like onset being shorter and the duration of your trip being shorter. But I guess for me, my precaution about tea is that I feel like you could also perhaps damage some stuff. So like I'd rather just raw dog it or just do the lemon tech.
I'm with you, man. Because yeah, like you said, I mean, a lot of times it's suggested that you drink the tea and then you eat the mushrooms anyway that are at the bottom of the tea because you don't want to leave any psilocybin behind.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'm with you. I just eat them. In the beginning, I loved the taste. I was like, hell yeah, I like mushrooms. This is good. The taste is fine. And then after I started to become a little more experienced and started to do some more like really high dose trips, the
Yeah.
taste it got unbearable. And even now to this day, the taste of mushrooms
Interesting.
to me is like almost unbearable, and I vomit almost every time. But I did
No
not.
way.
I haven't vomited from a single ceremony that we've done out of our two ceremonies with
No
Hamilton.
shit.
No vomiting.
Wow.
But before
Wow.
that, it's guaranteed. It's like the way it works for me is I'll eat the mushrooms and almost immediately I'm feeling nauseous,
Yeah.
and my mind is connected to my stomach biome. It must be. They say there's a bunch of neurons in your stomach, so I feel like my mind it's centered around my nausea.
Mhm.
And I try to hold that nausea for at least 30, 40 minutes because I don't want to lose any of the psilocybin. So at
Sure.
a certain point, I mean, during the come up, I'm just so stressed about the nausea that I eventually vomit, and it's like this beautiful purge. I mean, it feels
Good.
so good. I mean, I hate vomiting in general, but
For
it
sure.
feels amazing. And then after the vomit, the trip just becomes beautiful, and I can finally sort of like let go of what I was holding on to. It feels like.
Absolutely, and I think it's also worth noting though too, right? Because there's two distinctions between vomiting and purging, right? Because like one of them is like we know we're getting rid of some like blockages, whether it's like other physical ailments or some mental stuff that's going on, right? Because so both of my retreats down to Blue Morpho, my night fours, whew, those are the only times that I got nauseous just from the taste. Now, as we gather a little bit, I like to push things a little bit, see where we're going. So, the recent trip I went on to, I'm doing multiple rounds a night, like just, and I'm doing like bigger cups too. And I should see people just their looks on their face when they're watching me drink, like, oh my God, that just looks so awful. And they're like, we'll see you next year, bud. I'm like, no, I'll be back. Don't worry. Um, So with Hamilton, I cracked a joke. I didn't even realize that he had a background in golf, but so it was like my, I think it was my third night, first retreat down there. He had two different varieties. He had what he was called the OG, which is like a blend of like 25 different plants into the brew of ayahuasca. So ayahuasca is the vine, but it's also the name for, the tea, right? And he had another one that he called Aya Light, not because of like diet, but because of like light vision. And that one was like 10 plants. So I had each of those and I was like, what's up with an Arnold Palmer? He's like, what? So he's like doing these half and halves for me. And so he's like, hell yeah, man. But I remember my last night on the first retreat, it was the most badass thing I've ever experienced in my life, hands down. But what I was explaining though was like it was the first time that like I felt something nauseous immediately, and I was like, Tommy, this isn't the purge nausea. Like this is your body's like that was gross, and I was like, if you puke, bud, you got to go back up there and do that same round again. I'm like, we're gonna hold this together, dog. And that was the most beautiful ceremony I've seen in my life. And there were certain things that were going on. There was turbulent settings in the sense of like there were still people going through a lot, and I was trying to go as deep as I could, and I was finding some distractions, and then I was like really learning to accept that we're all one and then start working on my energies to try to put people at ease. And I'm like, Tommy, drop judgment, man. Like, we are all one. Be excited for this person. Be helpful, encouraging for that person. You know what I mean? Like, we're all in this shit together. And once I started doing that and really, really learning to love myself and accept it, it was beautiful. And now this noise was going on. I was just like, man, I wish I just had some type of like white noise situation for me to dive deep. And when you know it, it starts to rain. And it starts to rain like intensely. And suddenly it's like, and there's also a lot of smoke going on. I was a little bit annoyed with that, but I was like, Tommy, you never vocalized with other people that the smoking was intense. I'm like, they're just doing them. You can't be mad at that, man. Like, you allowed this to go, bud. I'm like, take ownership and responsibility for what you signed up for. So it's a lot of learning and maturing, And so the rain just kind of clears everything out. And suddenly I just smell like rich earth just being like, just like providing nourishment, and it covers up all the noise. And I'm just like, felt like I'm covered in this electrical blanket, and I'm just diving deep. And when you get in this good flow state of breath work, it feels like a jet stream of air is being provided directly to you, like as if you have just like really powerful like oxygen tubes coming to you. And it's just like you feel life force. It's just fantastic. So, anyways, it gets so loud you can barely hear anything at all. You can't even hear Hamilton. And he just yells across the room, and it's starting to storm. Thunder gods, hold the space. And then it's just like lightning crashes, boom. And I was like, this guy's working with nature. What? And I'm like, this is the most badass concert of my life. And so we're sitting there, and then like things start to calm down. And so before the ceremony, we established that we're gonna go at a faster pace. He's like, okay, more ecros. Yeah, we're gonna do this shit. So it's like everything's rapid fire. I'm like, yes, yes, do it faster. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And so I remember it was like the conditions kind of calmed down. And then he goes, nature, this volume for this long. And I'm like, holy shit, he is maestro of this, but everything else going on. Like this put like, so, I mean, like I already respected this man so much from the second of my first ceremony to this. I'm like, oh my God, infinite possibilities, truly. And I always had a very strong, beautiful connection with nature my whole life. I couldn't explain. And now to see it really being like in a beautiful artistry being worked with too, it was fascinating. It was mind blowing. And he called on for us to be healed in everything we didn't know that we needed to be healed and everything we truly did. And what I didn't share with you guys yet, though, is that since I was approximately 13 or 14, I've also suffered from cluster headaches. Now, cluster headaches colloquially were referred to as a suicide headache. You know why? Because people would hurl themselves off of buildings because they were so bad. Women who have gone through child labor, without any pain management, who also suffer from cluster headaches, consistently and unanimously agreed that the headache's worse than that. So they're called clusters because they'll happen every day in a rhythmic pattern. Like, so the theory is that there's something to do with an irregularity with your hypothalamus. So imagine having an alarm clock every day providing you with the worst type of pain ever that will make you pass out. Now, in the ceremony, this was one of my big intentions. I get surrounded by these ethereal beings. These were like white, bright, kind of alien like figures that was also angelic. And they're just performing surgery. I had some damages to my arms from like years of like chronic bartending, shaking a bunch of tins, working really hard, jolting stuff. And they just open up my arms and they reconfigure all the muscle tissue, and it felt amazing. And then they come up to the top and they lift my cranium. I'm just sitting here, just like watching, like, oh, hey, angels, aliens, thank you. And they're reassembling all this shit in my brain, and they put it back together, man. It was beyond fascinating. And I like knew that I was good to go. Now, I did screw up after this first retreat. I didn't respect the protocol for decompression and letting the medicine absorb. And so what's very critical about this though is your prep when you go into it is like, you're getting off of like eating red meats, pork, drugs, sex. That purity really matters. And then the afterwards actually matters more. And so I had started drinking like a day or two after that, and I had some fun. And then wouldn't you know it, around this last spring, the headaches came back like worse than ever. And I was exploring ketamine in the middle of a cluster headache on a trip, and it was like a biblical warfare thing. And I'm like real time in an ancient setting of like good versus evil. I text my mom, like, Mom, there's some biblical shit going on. She's like, she's in Paris. She's like, I know, son, I'm working on you right now. I'm like, how do you even know this stuff? So with the second retreat, though, I had talked with one of the other people that stay with Hamilton, Vivian. She's a wonderful human being, wealth of knowledge. She provided me a lot of guidance that's like helped me out that I still practice to this day. Just good perspectives about what we're doing. And she was like, I saw you drink after that first retreat. She's like, you're lucky all you got back was your headaches. And so I was going through a very brutal patch of them. And then on my third night, the recent retreat, I was in a state of God consciousness, working on everything. And I was having a blast this retreat, way better than the first time. My very first ceremony there, all the spirits that I saw before, they were all like high-fiving me. They're like, welcome back, bud. So good to see you. I'm like, yes, hell yeah. And I was having the best like laughing fits. I was laughing so hard, the entire room started laughing at me, laughing at certain things. I'm like, oh hell yeah! And then I felt like a really great advancement in myself and my growth and what I could contribute to the group and encourage people and participate in. But on my third night after a ceremony of that intense giggle fit, Hamilton's like, "You good?" I'm like, "Man, you're my dog for life, Hamilton. I love you so much. I'm like so blessed to know you." But so I decided, I'm like, all right, Tommy, so in this laughing fit, by the way, I'm like purging and then like, which other people are usually like, oh no, or something type stuff. And so the ceremony's over and I'm still insanely high. Like I said, this the second retreat I went to, I'm like, multiple of the plastic cups now at night. So I'm like, all right, Tommy, let's go to the bathroom. And I'm like, let's settle some shit, dude. And I was like, look here, Tommy, you've been a master of fun your entire life. I'm like, we are here to fix everything that's wrong with you right now. We are here to get all the guidance and the wisdom that we need to set us up for the rest of our life. I'm like, so right now we kind of need to cut the shit, bud. So I go to the bathroom in the lodge, the ceremony room, and it's like pitch black. So I go in there and I just sit down and like I'm so high I brought my bucket of puke with me, even though there's already fresh buckets there. So I'm in this bathroom, I got like 2 buckets. I'm like, cool, way to go. I'm like, at least we got backups. So I'm sitting there, it's in the dark, and mind you, this whole thing's screened in, but bugs still get in. Amazon don't give a shit, dude. So I'm sitting in there, my body's the hottest I've ever been. I'm like nauseous. I feel like, I have to like shit too as well. I'm getting swarmed by mosquitoes. I would describe this as perhaps one of the worst settings I've been in, while the highest I've ever been in my life. And I go, Tommy, you can't leave this bathroom till you feel the best you ever have in your entire life, and we fix everything. And I'm like, we're making this agreement right now, bud. I mean, we're cutting the shit literally. So I'm sitting in there and I was like, what I've learned from Hamilton was like this great communication with yourself. And this is what's like I carry with me everywhere though. Talking to your body, talking to your mind, talking to your heart, talking to your spirit, balancing these things out. Nobody taught us growing up that we should do that or we can do that. This is the answer to curing a lot of our basic problems. So I'm sitting here being like, body, relax. There you go, bud. And so the other thing is nobody just tells us to talk to the elements. And so I've been working on this shit, man. One of my goals was like, I'm getting fucking rid of these mosquitoes. So I'm like in my mind, kind of the formula for how we're working and communing with any spirit or like in ceremony. Example, I'll be like, Mama Aya, my intentions are for X, Y, and Z. Gratitude, love, and the more you mean it, the more authentic it is. I feel like everything's on the table. So here I am in the bathroom, getting swarmed by the mosquitoes. I'm like in there, nature spirits, clear the vicinity of mosquitoes. Infinite love, infinite gratitude. Woof, they're gone. I'm like, sweet. First problem. Because you don't want to try and take out all problems at once. Like Hamilton related to us, he's like, think about it as low hanging fruit. Get the easy fruit first, then get used to that. And then what's left? The next round of fruit. So I'm like, cool, mosquitoes gone. I was like, nature, I'm really, really hot. Please hit me with a gust of wind. Gratitude. Little bits of wind come down. I'm like, body, cool down. Body's cooling down. I'm like, excellent. And then I'm like, Mama ayahuasca. I'm asking to purge all debts in this life and all debts in all of my past lives. Oh, gratitude. That's a tall order, I will say. So, as you can imagine, that's like coming out every way possible. So cool. Now I'm starting to feel a little bit better. I'm here in the toilet in the dark, and now I'm sitting in here feeling the best I have. Now I'm ready to start doing that work. I'm like, Tommy, now we're going to work and fix everything in your life. Worked on the headaches. I started asking about my path and acquiring the skills for running this new company that I'm going to have. I see that in real time, and then I start seeing things about me regarding like different realms, angelic realms, things about shamanism. And then it's me realizing that I'm going to have this beautiful interwoven thing going on with my life forever. And then I start doing some selfless stuff. I start letting my wife know that I forgive her, like Hamilton related, like, yeah, you don't have to just work on yourself and you can do remote work from here. So I'm like working on things with my family. I'm asking, for my wife to fucking be okay. She also suffered from brain aneurysm and a couple other brain surgeries that like plagued her and give her a lot of anxiety, and I'm like letting her know that things are okay, sending my spirit and true love regarding, everything, that I still love her no matter what, and still always will. And I went through this long list of intentions, just banging them out, and you're seeing everything with precise, like lucid vision. And I'm like, all right, dude, we did it, Tommy. And I let out the most intense, beautiful cry of just being proud of myself and conquering all these things and really maturing and setting myself up for life. So I'm like, we can get out of here, bud. So I finally turn on this flashlight. I'm like, my pants are all twisted up. I'm like in the dark. And I'm like, all right, maybe we ain't done yet. I'm like, Mama ayahuasca, grant me infinite awareness and infinite night vision. I'm like, I'm not gonna get no night vision, dog. I'm like super high. So I collect my pants and I get out, and then I realize everybody's asleep in the ceremony room. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, I guess we're gonna stay in here tonight, man. So I don't even turn on my light. I'm just like crawling on the ground, like military style a little bit. I bump into an empty bucket. I'm like, oh, thank God. Excellent. Slide this off to the side, find a mat. I'm the most beautiful peace and serenity I've ever encountered in my life to date at that moment. And then like 30 minutes go by and I hear somebody leave. I'm like, oh, I can get the fuck out of here. So I get out and it's the day before the supermoon, clear sky. And, the moon just seems closer than ever. And I just let out like this one last beautiful tear that was like thick and gelatinous, cold and hot at the same time. And it dispersed like a million liquid diamonds across my cheek. And I just felt like it was very symbolic of like, I'm done with this chapter in my life and we're amazing, man. We can just keep moving forward, man. Like, I can't encourage enough what your experience can be and what you can get out of being with Hamilton and the whole team and the whole vibe there. I look forward to that to more than like my own birthday, to Christmas, to anything else. And I know that I'm personally going to be doing annual trips probably every June and July, something like that. And my goals are to everybody around me, I've seen ripples around me in my community, and they're like, "What, like the fuck's going on with Tommy? Why is he so much better than he's ever been his entire life? How has he stopped doing an 8 ball of coke every 2 days, and like not drinking an entire bottle of tequila every day, and like doing all this other stuff?" They're everybody was like, I was functioning very great. I was very successful at work while doing these things, but obviously it's not healthy, right? And I had no like appearance that I would ever stop this lifestyle. So when I came back from Peru, like it was inspiring to a lot of friends of mine. And so it's been cool that this positive ripple and the impacts that we do with the world around us, from what's going on from that real healing that you get to experience with Hamilton, is the best. It's so cool.
Yeah, man. It it feels like we're in like the center of the eye of the storm or something, like we're here trying to promote peace, trying to promote love and healing. And man, this community really feels like just a great environment for that.
Yeah.
As the last question, as we begin to hit an hour here and wrap up,
Yeah.
uh, where do you see yourself going with the Blue Morpho Academy, with the stuff you've learned? Like, do you want to facilitate? Are you trying to do this stuff professionally? Like, where do you see yourself going in the future from here?
Perfect timing because this is exactly the direction I was loving and hoping to actually go into. Synchronicity, my man.
Beautiful.
So when I had mentioned my very first uh, ayahuasca experience about seeing that progression of shamanic ceremonies, that was the one thing that wasn't exactly clear to me when I asked about my path. And so, what I've been experiencing also with my private ceremonies is there's very much so like remember I mentioned I said the vibe from the shamanic spirits or the shamanic spirit was like welcome to the show. Now when I'm doing these other things in my private ceremonies like alone, the vibe is kind of turned into welcome back. And so I kind of perceive and the notion of past lives, what I experienced was those were either my past lives or it was something that was integral to my past lives, right? And so with my youth and my growing up and even in the beverage world, man. So think about this. I've always had a very innate role as in a guide for a setting and an experience. I very much so been somebody that's like, hey guys, we're gonna take these things, I'm gonna introduce them to you, and I've got everything mapped out. We're gonna go out in nature and do this, or we're gonna go in this really insane setting because I know all you can handle this shit, we're gonna have fun. I'm gonna be a conductor. And the bar is no different. I'm like, here you go, here's your cocktail. I'm actually having a little bit too, so you're not alone in this. Let me guide this setting for you. Something that's just very, very natural. And within these deep realms of like the psychonaut life that I live, I feel insane comfort. And so I very much so feel absolutely my goals are to continuously go down master facilitator, like 100%. And so when I was with Christian, I explained to him like it's kind of this fork in the road a little bit. I got like this cool job I'm getting ready to have, but I truly feel a very strong calling. And it's like in my ceremony state, they're all like, "Hey guys," or "Hey Tommy, come on down here. You're gonna be so great at this." And they're like, here's some gifts back, dude. It's like, here's this Icaro. And I'm like, cool. So like I've been learning like kind of humming with my voice and whistling, and things are just coming out of nowhere. And when I practice this alone, it's like my vision lights up, and there's like a orchestra of other spirits who are like, hey man, check it out. You want this one too? Or try this tape, type vibe. It's cool. But yeah, so what Christian had said was why not treat it as a hobby? It's like shamanism isn't going anywhere. He's like, you still have your life and your regular thing. And I kind of perceived, or I took from that, I'm like, yeah, I don't need to alienate myself from this really big, elaborate, beautiful network I've already fostered and contribute to, right? And this can be a beautiful accent and like, subtle bass note with everything going on in my life. And so with my own personal ceremonies that I conduct with friends, I don't charge them anything, especially because, I'm still learning and they're going to trust me with some stuff and we've had beautiful, amazing results. And I'm really proud of my artistry and how I apply myself. Like I'm definitely like guinea pigging myself and almost like and I always have been in like an evil Knievel way, like imagine a wet noodle evil Knievel flying off a ramp. Sometimes that's going to stick, sometimes it's going to drop, and then I just laugh it off, pick myself back up, get on that insane dirt bike and keep cruising, man. But yeah, 100%, I'm so fascinated by it, and I imagine that sometimes I'll probably spend extensive periods down in the Amazon, like maybe even a year at a clip, but I'm not trying to get too stuck into a rigid timeline and make myself having to be just like restricted to whatever like periods of like or like time stamps, you know what I mean? Take it as it comes, go with the flow, listen to my intuition, I feel like the more that I do that, everything is easier and easier. Doors just open up at the right time. Forcing things, you'll know when you're forcing it because you can only get so far, or you're going to stumble or something. But yeah, those are my goals. What about you with the whole course?
Man, I'm not sure yet. I've taken courses before in like psychedelic assisted therapy training. Actually, the
Hmm.
reason this podcast is even a thing is because I took a course through psychedelics today. It was there. It was called "Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists," and then "Integration and Self Care." And actually, as the course was wrapping up, there was they called it an integration project. So it was like your
Mm,
final project, your final like test, basically, and you had to use all of the things you've learned, all of whatever you've learned on your journey previously as well, and sort of map out what your future is going to be, create some sort of a structure, or create a piece of art. Some people made music and stuff like that and actually played it live for us on Zoom, which was pretty cool. But for me, I decided I'm just going to structure this podcast. And me and my brother had been talking about doing a podcast anyway, because we talk about this stuff all the
Hmm.
time. He's a psychonaut as well. Uh,
Excellent.
so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to structure everything out, plan it all out, use this as an opportunity to actually start the thing instead of just talking about it. And it's
Right.
just been history from there. So,
I
I
love
mean,
that.
man, and I discovered the Blue Morpho Academy through interviewing Barrett, as we had talked about before. You know her,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
interviewing Hamilton. He told me during our podcast about the Blue Morpho Academy, and I was like, man, this sounds like a great opportunity. So the
It's
podcast
killer.
itself has just given me so much. I mean, so many connections with people and just random stuff here and there. It's like that butterfly effect.
Truly. So I ask for, well, I love the name of your podcast, first off. So the concept of infinity is huge for me. So, like on my hand, so on my thumb, infinity symbol, right? But the other things are
Love it.
they're like my consistent pursuits, which for infinite love, light, knowledge, and wisdom. So my process for the ceremony, I establish my sanctuary, and then I'm like, my intentions are for these blanket ones, and then I work for other ones though. But when I ask for infinite resource and things like that, it's situations like this, and it all comes together. People just pop up, and like the things that you need, they really materialize. So it's not even just like our beautiful like metaphysical aspects of their mind and that type of consciousness healing. It's like everything does come together truly when you work with things. They work with you too. It's not like you work for me, I work for you. We're working together, and when we work together, I think everything's possible. Infinite possibilities is my thing too, man. Like, so when you ask me about am I going to be a facilitator, it's like I don't see why not, because I'm not going to limit myself to a ceiling of what I can and cannot do. I'm just going to keep exploring and know that everything's possible. It's a beautiful way to look at life. You'll find out if, like, I believe that obstacles and challenges are lessons. They're there for you to find out how far you're willing to go. That's all that is. And if you're happy with where you're at, cool. I respect everybody's path. For me, like, this is the best stuff, and I love to be a part of this community for us to share and encourage and uplift and elevate each other. It's wonderful. It's very wonderful.
Yeah, man. It's really been a beautiful experience having gone through this course and having just been able to commune with everybody here. It's just been such a blessing, man. And this is why I wanted to share all of you guys with my audience, because you guys such beautiful humans, dude. And I
Thank you.
just
You're
really
beautiful
appreciate
too,
you.
though.
Thanks, man. Thank you. I really appreciate you coming on, man, being so open, sharing your stories. It's been both entertaining and eh, just amazing. So just thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
dude.
Thank you, man. Well, I like to provide like some good context because, some people out there, they probably just believe, oh, Westerners tinkering around with, medicine or whatever. Cause there's definitely like a whole trend of people playing around with these things, especially in the United States, like, kind of like this like West Coast hippie vibe sort of thing, right? We're like, oh, we're all just using these labels and whatever. I know some of it's legit and some of it isn't, but there's quackery in all fields of like professional Western medicine and also the spiritual stuff too, right? But it's nice to, I guess, for me to share some of the tremendous difficulties I went through and how I was able to survive those through a very legit means with the greatest professionals for me in my life through Blue Morpho in our community and plant medicine when used appropriately. Dude, I'm happy to share, and I'd love to keep having some fun times with you, Josh. Absolutely, it's been a pleasure being on here. I'm thankful that you even put this up for us, man. For real, thank you.
It's my pleasure, dude. And I'd love to continue connecting with you guys. However many people want to come on, I'm gonna keep posting up in the Telegram, see if anybody else wants to come on. It's amazing, dude.
Excellent, man. Excellent. Yeah, brother.